You're listening to the 3 Feet Radio Show with Ben Carbonaro and Luke Herbert. From our studios come special guests and netball commentary, exclusively on YouTube.
G'day listeners and welcome to the first 3 Feet Radio Show for the year. Exciting times ahead with the ANZ Championship to kick off very soon. Joining me in the studio this morning is Luke Herbert. G'day Luke.
And g'day Ben, and just some late breaking news. Jade Clark has signed with the Adelaide Thunderbirds, but we'll come back to that in our ANZ Championship preview show, which we'll do sometime next month.
We do, it's very exciting news indeed. And joining us this morning is the Netball Australia CEO in Kate Palmer. Good morning, Kate.
Good morning, Ben. Good morning, Luke.
Just to get things going here, Kate, it's exciting times for the ANZ Championship with Season 8 starting sooner rather than later. Are you looking forward to it following on from last season where we saw a thrilling grand final and an overall increased interest in the league?
Yes, look, I must admit I'm missing my netball and looking forward to another year that's going to lift the game in Australia and internationally. I'm not sure whether we're going to see any more of those 14-second, last-minute wins as we did in the grand final last year, but certainly it's going to be a fabulous season.
And I'm just going to move us forward a bit down the court, but you were recently quoted in a Sydney Morning Herald article where you said that expansion is the way to go for the league. So how excited are you about the prospect of extra teams and more games in 2017?
Well, it's really critical for us for the future. We, as you're aware, moved from 8 teams to 5 8 years ago, and I think there's clearly a lack of opportunity for Australian athletes, umpires and coaches. And so for us, the addition of 3 teams means that we're going to have more Australian content, which will keep the fans in Australia happier. We'll make sure that our broadcast numbers continue to lift and certainly give our corporate partners more support. For us all across the board, it's going to be exciting. I think bringing new entities in to own and lead and manage the teams is also very good because we'll bring in different expertise and a different way of viewing the world.
And Kate, just on these expansion teams, how important do you feel will pooling of resources be? For example, we've seen the New South Wales Scripps partner with the Swans, and they've certainly pooled their resources, and that's been one that's been going on for a long, long time. Do you think that'll be happening with the expansion teams?
Well, look, I think what we're looking for, partnerships are really critical. I think that's the key in any organisation, the partners and how you can add value to each other. So I suspect just as our current teams have partners who contribute and add value to them, but also, and vice versa, the same thing will happen in this scenario. And I think the reality is, though, that the teams that or the entities that own these teams will need to be highly capable of running professional sporting teams. So not everyone can actually do this well. So they'll need a high-performance environment. They'll need to have the resources to be able to market and commercialise their team effectively. So the level of expertise and our expectation around that is quite high. So yes, partnerships are important, but so is the capability of the entity running the team.
And just following on from that, I'm going to skip the first part of the question, but will there be potential new teams be based and will they tap into new markets or underrepresented markets? So what kind of angle are you looking here for in rather sort of, if I may be simplistic?
No, look, I mean, the reality is that the Victorian and New South Wales markets, will be able to manage or cope and actually embrace, I think is probably a better word, new teams. It would be great that in terms of the population of netball participants and fans and the media interest in those 2 states, it's very high. And having hometown rivalry, and we see that in other sports, is, I think, a really exciting opportunity for our current teams, but also the new teams. So it's those 2 markets I think are just a logical one. And then the other market, we're looking at a range of options for the first or one of the 3 teams new teams into the league. So that one, we've got 2 or 3 options up our sleeves, and we're exploring those at the moment.
Okay, with the addition of the Australian-based teams, do you feel that the New Zealand-based teams will have to be, should we say, better perform for that side of the league to remain relevant?
Look, I think that the New Zealand team still got a bit of work to do on their performance, and we see that in results. There's no hiding from the fact that only one New Zealand team has won the league in 8 years, and so I think this will be interesting to see whether it balances out that performance, because of in Australia we'll have 8 teams rather than 5, so additional athletes in the league means the next layers of athletes will be on court rather than sitting on benches or playing in ANL. So it'll be interesting to see what actually happens in the short term, and then from our perspective, it's really about building the depth of talent in Australia. So. And I suspect New Zealand will be really keen in the not too distant future to expand the number of teams in New Zealand as well.
Well, while I would like to touch upon expanding teams in New Zealand, I think I will have to save that for another day, because it just opens up a whole host of issues. But what I'll just briefly say on air, if I may, just for the sake of the listener, and to tidy these loose ends up a little bit before I move on in the program, I think we are starting to head the right direction on this side of the ditch. The new National Netball League we've been waiting for that for many years. So we're heading in the right direction. The question is, how far do we get in that? And Ben and I will come back to that on this program. But certainly I think the Kiwi side of things is in a lot of trouble if there isn't vast improvements from our side. But I just want to then come back to, in terms of venues for games. And Ben and I were chucking around this off air, and as we do, and we eventually came around to this question, and Ben right now has got a look on his face because he knows some of the angles I came up with that were a bit not quite right. But what kind of support would be required to host games or have teams in netball markets like Canberra, for example?
Yeah, so that's a really interesting opportunity, because we think that certainly all of our markets across Australia need to be exposed to high-level netball. So we saw in Tasmania they hosted Wales and Scotland before the World Cup, and the level of interest in Tasmania for that strategy was incredibly high. And we know the Tasmanian government is incredibly supportive of that. So we think in both those, and certainly probably ACT and Tasmania, there are opportunities for more high-level or high-performance content almost immediately. The reality is that they would need support to do that because of the size of their entities. They run ANL teams and have done that relatively successfully. So they know how to run events, and they have a huge base of volunteers. But in terms of expertise of running a high performance event, they will need support, and that they're the things that we need to consider. And that's why it's important in some instances to have different partners at the table, because people can offer different things to the mix. So infrastructure is a huge issue for sport nationally, and netball is one of those. And I think New South Wales, or the New South Wales Swifts, suffer this now. They have a massive venue, which is beautiful, 17,000 seat, but the jump from that or up to that from where they are now, which is doesn't allow them to sell any more membership, a tiny little venue. There's nothing in between, and they need something in between. And I think that Queensland suffers from that, or the Firebirds suffer from that. The Vixens are spoiled for choice in terms of venues in Victoria. They're magnificent. Adelaide, I think, has got some pretty good opportunities, and now even Perth, with the arena coming on board, are starting to get opportunities. So, it's a huge issue for the sport that we need to deal with in terms of grow. How do you grow if you haven't got the room to expand in terms of spectators or members? So it'll be, I think, a challenge for us in a couple of states for, a little while.
And Kate, just back on what we were talking about earlier about the success of the ANZ Champs last year and increased media coverage and that kind of thing, it appears to me anyway that it looks like that There's more broadcasters want to get involved with the great game, and that's certainly what you want. And it's certainly an improvement from a number of years ago. I think it may have been when you were back at Netball Victoria when I first met you. You told me that there was a mentality within the sport to complain about a lack of media coverage, but it's great now. It looks like the broadcasters are wanting to come to Netball Australia, not NA having to go to the broadcasters, and that's great for the game.
Yeah, look, it's always been about the product, Ben, and I think, back in the days when even Commonwealth Bank Trophy, we were pushing all of the time to improve the product, and I think the good thing now is that we've got a great product and we're innovating every year, so something's changing. I think our state bodies and the owners of the teams do a terrific job of presenting the game. The athletes are unbelievable in terms of the commitment they make to their performance, and you could not question their commitment to actually improving the way the game's played. All parts of the games, the umpires are more professional now than they ever have been. So the product is good, and the product is getting better, and the broadcasters and the media in general recognise that and are excited about it. We still, though, have a lot of work to be done, and my view has been that, we can't sit back and whinge about what we don't have. It's about actually being really active in creating opportunities. And from our perspective, we've got a massive project on fan development and engagement happening at the moment. And, we see that as a really big opportunity to grow the interest in the game from a broader market. So I think, the sport needs to work really hard at that, invest in lifting the profile. The broadcasters have a role to play, of course, and they do a terrific job, but, much more we need to work together to make that happen. And certainly the mainstream media, print media is terrific, and I think social media has been fabulous in terms of its ability to allow us to connect with our fans. Still a lot of work to be done, though, and if we're going to make this really continue to grow, we want it to be the premier netball league in the world, but also the premier women's sport in the world.
Well, I say just have it one of the premier sporting competitions overall in the world, and that gives it even a higher bar to reach. But coming back to actually what I wanted to ask, and not just getting sidetracked off into little points, I want to backtrack slightly because you were talking about venues, and just to kind of qualify my brief question and point here, in Christchurch I've been having discussions around venues and sporting stadiums because of one of the main stadiums had been knocked out in the quakes, although it's not the one that the Tactic use, and the Tactic have a similar problem. They need a venue that is a suitable size. So and I don't expect a complete answer here or anything, but just to, continue to thread at a topic for our listeners, who then would you say then do you look to build that infrastructure? Because there's crossover between the sporting teams who use it, and usually there's some government involvement. Do you ever see a day where the franchises build a stadium?
Look, when you're talking about the investment that the Queensland government have just made in a venue in Queensland, that's a $30 million venue, and they still require an additional $10 million to deliver, what they need for it's a massive community facility, but will also be used for the Firebirds and their high performance programs, and potentially some of their games. I wouldn't say no, because, in the future, I guess if we continue to grow at the rate we are now, anything is possible. We should limit ourselves or say we can't do that. But the reality is most infrastructure would be shared. And I think that both the state and federal governments, have responsibilities to provide infrastructure in partnership with sport. And they certainly support sports like the AFL significantly in terms of their level of funding. We see it on an annual basis, quite massive investments in that sort of infrastructure. So I think it's about, ongoing master planning and planning for long-term future of the sport by making sure that we have the right facilities in place. And I have to say our states have done a terrific job. And as I said, states like Victoria, who have a really major event focus, our sport for choice are beautiful. And because of the Australian Open, of course, we have an opportunity to play in, venues that are the best in the world.
And it's also about too, Kate. I think not just these venues, but it's also about bums on seats too. If you build if you build a venue that's big enough, they will come and bums on seats. And in order to get more bums on seats, there's been mooted maybe about the 2 point goal. Is that one possible thing to get more bums on seats?
Well, I think it's about, again, goes back to the product and on what is going to excite the fans. And so I think it's about exploring, innovation. It's about making sure that we continue to make sure the fans have something exciting to see. And and we've seen in Fast Five that the 2 and 3 point shots have actually brought a new element to the game, changed the game, the way the game's played. Fast Five was, the precursor to removing the whistle after the goal. Now we don't have to listen to 80 shrill whistles in a game. They've gone out of the game forever. And so we need to look at what other products of the game provide us in terms of examples of what it means, and then include them or adopt them into the traditional game where relevant. So I'm not suggesting we muck around with the game, but I think we do need to continue to innovate so that it is an exciting game. And any professional sport in the world does innovate regularly so that the interest is kept for everyone. And look, our athletes are continuing. They're faster, fitter, stronger than they ever have been before. And every year, I am amazed that they can do more. So they will keep challenging us as well. And I think that's really critical for the game too. So what do they bring, and how do they change the game? And how do we test them and challenge them to be better?
I certainly agree with you on the point about innovation. I think it's very important, and I've been waiting for years for a tactical interchange bench to occur. Just as one example, but just to kind of try and play sort of devil's advocate here, and just to show you a question about the 2 point goal. And I'm gonna openly admit I'm representing people here that aren't too fond of the idea, and that's. But couldn't you then make the argument that yes, it has worked in Fast Five, and elements of Fast Five you've been able to transfer over, but isn't Fast Five while it's been successful, but isn't it kind of a bit sort of gimmicky?
Well, it may be now, but I think in the future the reality is, there will be a participation product launch. We'll have Fast Five in Australia for the next 3 years. I don't think that. I think the sport has probably not really identified how that game fits with our current traditional game. And the work we've done, the research we have now is starting to back up the fact that we need to be open to appealing to a broader market in Australia. So there is a range of products that we can introduce. So there'll be traditional netball, there's Fast Five netball, there's indoor nets netball. What are the ways the game's played, and how do we actually differentiate each of those products so that different people, different markets can play. In terms of, whether you like the 2 point shot or not, one of the things that's come into our game that lots of people don't like is the prevalence of the very tall, big shooter. And it makes the game, and some people think it's great, other people think it makes the game very boring, where you just throw the ball in the air to the tallest person on the court. And I think what the 2 point shot does is change the tactics and the way the game's played. And I think being able to actually make sure don't allow single positions on the court dominate. I think a lot of countries, it's really interesting, everyone's at the moment on the hunt for very, 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 very tall defenders so that they can stop the tall shooters. But as soon as you put a 2 point shot in, of course, there are other, priorities around, all of a sudden the long shot is coming back into the game. So Maria Tuteyer, I suspect she's inspired a whole generation of young goalers who'll be shooting long shots. So, the jury's out at the moment. No decisions have been made about what innovations, but I agree with you around the interchange. I think that there is a real need to actually, be able to do that. So stop, make sure that the coaches can use their benches more effectively, that it's a more tactical and strategic game. I actually think we already have those strategic timeouts in the game already. The coaches call them, the athletes call them. it's actually called injury now. But obviously the new rules now are going to limit that. So, they're the things I think we need to look at to improve the game.
All right, Kate, thanks very much for joining us this morning for the first time this year.
It's a pleasure.
No doubt we'll catch up with you later on in the year. And Kate, I look forward to seeing you at a game. We always bump into each other in the corridors or wherever we are.
Yep, great. Thanks, Ben. Thank you, Luke, and good luck for this year.
Thanks, Kate. Have a good one.
You've been listening to the 3 Feet Radio Show with Ben Carbonaro and Luke Herbert. Tune in next time for more special guests and netball commentary exclusively on YouTube.